Welcome, zombies. Let's have a quick look at Madison, Wisconsin. Welcome, zombies. Today we're taking a look at Madison, Wisconsin, up here in the Great Lakes states, and it's kind of towards the bottom of Wisconsin right here. There's two specific buildings we're going to take a look at in this video, and the first one's going to be the Wisconsin Capitol building, which is located here in Madison. Has this huge dome on it, which is the largest granite dome in the whole world. Wow. And was built supposedly by people who had no tools or proper machinery to be able to do so. And if you're new to these videos, the hypothesis here, or what really seems to be truth, is that these buildings are much older than we're told, and we're lied to about them, and they were built by a very advanced, prosperous stone masonry civilization that used to exist in these lands, but that's not here anymore. Now we're here, and we're told different stories about these buildings, who built them, where they come from, and all of that. The second building that I'm going to take a look at, not even so much at the building as a whole, but the symbols specifically on the building, like this stone eagle right here and these stone pyramids depicted all over this building. And this is the state office building. And there's also statues all over the Wisconsin Capitol dome on the exterior. And then also we're going to look at a little bit of the interior and talk a little bit about who these people are. We'll also see right here there's a stone eagle once again depicted. If you've watched my previous videos, I point this out all of the time. There's always robed men, there's always a stone eagle, and there's always a robed stone woman who we'll also take a look at in this video on all of this architecture. Three repeating symbols or people constantly showing up on this very old stone architecture. So I think a good place to start is, let's actually start with the stone eagle right here. Why is this stone eagle depicted all over this architecture everywhere? And by understanding this stone eagle, it'll help us understand the pyramids and everything else a little bit better that we're going to talk about in this video. If you read in the book of Exodus in the Old Testament in the Bible, it's Exodus 19:4 says, "Ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself." This verse is referring to when Moses parted the Red Sea and escaped the Israelites out of Egypt and took them to the Promised Land. Now, the Promised Land, which we've all heard of that phrase before, but what exactly does it mean? It comes from a promise that God made to a man anciently, and that man's name was Abraham. And God promised him that he would have a certain location of land out of all the earth for himself and his posterity for forever. So that's why in Exodus 19:4 right here, he talks about escaping the Israelites, the children of Abraham, out of Egypt, taking them back to the Promised Land. And the symbol for that is, I did it on eagle's wings. God being the eagle, and he carried the people out of Egypt to the Promised Land on his wings, eagle's wings. And the Israelites were in bondage, in captivity in Egypt, because when they were in the Promised Land, they didn't do the things they were supposed to do, so God kicked them out. But then he like he always does, brings them back into the promised land and gives them another chance. Okay, that promised land that was promised to Abraham is the land we now call the United States of America. It's not the land over in the Middle East. That is a hoax and a deception so that we don't see and we don't know where the promised land actually is. And the reason that that place over there is called Israel with the capital city named Jerusalem is because the promise was first made to Abraham, but then it continued through some of his children. Specifically, a man named Jacob was one of Abraham's grandchildren, one of his children, and Jacob received the promise that him and all of his seed would have the promised land for forever, that the covenant, the promise would continue through this man named Jacob. Well, Jacob's name got changed to Israel. So Israel is just talking about a man named Jacob. It's literally that man's name. Jacob's name got changed to Israel. So all of Jacob or Israel's kids are known as the house of Israel, the tribes of Israel, or the Israelites. And then the next child that the promise continued through and was promised to was to Joseph, often known as Joseph of Egypt. So the eagle is God's symbol of bringing the Israelites, the children of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, to the promised land, the promised location, the land that he originally covenanted with Abraham. Okay, we'll come back to the promised land and the Israelites and talk about pyramids and all that in just a second. But I wanted to touch on the Wisconsin State Capitol building right here, which is a very, very cool looking building. It's like in an X pattern, and all four sides of it have these Corinthian columns right here that are supporting a pediment, which is that triangle shape with all the stone people and figures inside of, which we'll take more of a look at. It also has these four domes right here, four smaller domes on all sides, and then right above those domes are these series of statues right here, again, four surrounding it. Bunch of Corinthian columns supporting the largest granite dome in the world. And then there's a woman up here in gold wearing a robe, holding a ball in her hand with an eagle sitting on top of it. And like I already mentioned, it looks out over this water right here, which is, this whole area is honestly just very gorgeous. And this gray building down here is the one that we just saw the stone eagle on, and the pyramids also on there, which we'll talk about in just a second. And they do the same thing with this one that they do in lots of stories about the Capitol buildings, is like they built one and then that wasn't good enough. They built another one that wasn't good enough. They built another one. Usually it's 3 times. This time they did it 5 different times, they say. So this building right here that we just looked at, completed in 1917, is the 5th Capitol building of Wisconsin, according to the story. And here's a look at the lady, what I call the stone woman, standing on top of the dome, and in her hand she's got a ball and an eagle with its feet standing on top of that ball. We'll talk about the ball in just a second, but that eagle is a representation of God escaping his people, the Israelites, out of bondage and bringing them to him in the promised land. And they do the same thing here like we saw in Michigan in that Capitol building, where we see this stone woman all over the place. And in Michigan, it's like, oh, this woman just represents Michigan. And right here it says, this woman just represents Wisconsin. The Wisconsin statue on the dome was sculpted in 1920. In the left hand, she holds a globe surmounted by an eagle, and her right arm is outstretched to symbolize the state motto, forward. And what I'm putting forward here is that this is all just ancient symbolism that's connected to God, Jesus Christ, this ancient promise that he made, and the promised land. And these buildings are very old, from much older time periods, from people that knew Jesus Christ and worshiped Jesus Christ. And that's why there's new stories written about the buildings themselves and about the symbols and people all over these buildings, is because the people in charge of them, which they're in charge of them via the government, they don't want this. They worship the devil, they worship Lucifer, and so they want to hide God and hide Jesus Christ. So they make up false stories about what this stuff all actually means, which is why they're saying, oh yeah, this lady just is a symbol of Wisconsin, and she's got a globe and an eagle, and her outstretched hand, like stretching up to God, just means forward. And it says that she weighs 3 tons. And it also says right here, the statue is commonly misidentified as Lady Forward or Miss Forward, which is the name of another statue on the Capitol grounds, which is this one right here, which is not a different lady. It's the same lady. It's the stone woman. And let's talk about who she is. In the Old Testament, again, in Isaiah 54:5, it says, thy maker is thine husband, the Lord of hosts is his name, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel, the God of the whole earth shall he be called. So it's speaking about the Israelites, and saying, thy maker, God, the creator, is your husband, putting the Israelites in the wife position. And God is the husband because he made this covenant with them that he can't break. He can't divorce from them. He is married to them for forever. So that's why it says, thy maker is thine husband. In Jeremiah 3:14, it says, I am married unto you. Speaking about the Israelites, the children of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, he says, I'm married unto you. He's the husband, they're the wife. Malachi 2:14 refers to the Israelites as the wife of the covenant. He's the husband, they're the wife. And Revelation 21:9, this is in the New Testament, says, I will shew thee the bride, the lamb's wife, referring to the capital lamb, Jesus Christ, as the husband, and his bride, his wife, is the children of Israel. He's married to them because he made this covenant with them that he can't break. And so when we see her right here wearing robes, talk about robes in just a second, but there's that eagle, which is the symbol of God escaping the Israelites out of Egypt and bringing them to the promised land. And she is the wife symbol. She is the symbol of his marriage to those people. And that's why she and the eagle are everywhere, all over this architecture, because this architecture comes from that promise made to those people, the seed of Abraham. And this is the land that was promised to them. And the robe, why she's always wearing a robe and why the men on these buildings are also always wearing robes, is because it's more symbolism of God and righteousness, and even more specifically, his priesthood, his hood of priests. These robed men are priests. So Job 29:14 says, I put on righteousness, it clothed me, my judgment was as a robe. Isaiah 61:10, he hath clothed me with the garments of salvation, he hath covered me with the robe of righteousness. As a bridegroom decketh himself with ornaments, and as a bride adorneth herself with her jewels. He's the bridegroom, the people that he covenanted with, that's the bride. So that's why we see this stone woman holding the eagle. She's robed, and she is the symbol of the wife of this ancient covenant with the Israelites. And then what is the globe that she's holding in her hand? The globe that she's holding in her hand is what the Old Testament calls the firmament. Genesis 1:6, this is the very beginning of the Old Testament, when God's creating the world. He said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. If you want to hear more about this creation, the waters and the firmament, I made a full video on that called Proof of the Firmament. So go watch that for an in-depth explanation of everything, because I'm definitely going to skip over a few things right here. But it says that he put a firmament in the waters to divide the waters. And then it says that God made the firmament and divided the waters with it, and called the firmament heaven. Now the root word, basically what the whole word is, the word heaven is the word heave, or you could say that the word is heaven, we just don't pronounce it that way. But heave means to lift or haul a heavy thing with great effort, like heaving a stone into place. And when you continue reading in the Old Testament and you pay attention when it talks about the firmament again, it tells us what the firmament actually is. It says in Psalms 19:1, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. His handiwork, heaving a stone into place, because he's the most high mason. And if you notice, all this architecture that we're looking at is stone architecture. It's masonry architecture. And all of the righteous people in the scriptures are masons. They're constantly building with stone and creating cities and structures, altars, towers, temples out of stone. Genesis 7:11 says, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up. This is talking about Noah's flood, when God's flooding the whole earth. Where did all that water come from? Well, the fountains of the great deep were broken up, so some of it was coming up from the bottom. Then also the windows of heaven, the firmament, were opened, so that water could pour in from above. In Exodus 24:10, Moses and some others saw God. And so right here it says they saw the God of Israel, and it says they saw under his feet a paved work of a sapphire stone, the body of heaven in its clearness. So right here it's talking about God's feet on the firmament, and the firmament is a paved work of sapphire stone. And if we continue, Ezekiel 1:22 says the firmament was stretched out over their heads, and it was as the color of a terrible crystal. So according to the Old Testament, the firmament, and people twist the scriptures into whatever they want to make it be, but if you read the scriptures for what they actually say, it's saying God heaved a heavy stone, a clear paved sapphire crystal into place that enclosed this world and separated waters, kept waters outside of it and other waters inside of it. And just like we read right here, it's under his feet. And then also Isaiah 66:1 says the same thing. It says, "Thus saith the Lord, the heaven is my throne and the earth is my footstool." So that's why we see right here him, the eagle, the one who carries his people out of captivity and into freedom in the promised land. That's why we see the eagle with its feet on the firmament right here. And what the liars have told us is that we live on land and water that somehow sticks to the outside of this firmament. But the truth is, outside of the firmament, it's why you look up at the sky and it's blue, just like you're looking at the ocean, because that's actually all water out there. And we live inside of the firmament on the dry land, and there's some seas that surround us, which is the water that's kept inside of the firmament. And he is above us with his feet on top of the firmament, peering down and watching all of his creation. And that's what this whole stone woman, gold woman right here is saying. It's talking about this ancient covenant with the children of Abraham. He's the one that escapes them out of bondage and brings them to the promised land where they can have liberty and freedom. And she's wearing the robes of righteousness, and got the eagle, God, has his feet on the firmament. This is all a 100% symbol of God's creation and the people that he covenanted with inside of that creation, and how he escapes them from bondage and brings them to the promised land. And as long as they live correctly in the promised land, it's freedom and liberty and prosperity to the maximum. But if they don't follow Jesus Christ, if they don't believe in him, then that freedom and that prosperity gets taken away, and they're carried back into captivity and bondage, and they're lied to. And that's our situation right now, because we've stopped believing in Jesus Christ. We twist, even a lot of us that do believe in Jesus Christ and in the scriptures, we twist that, what the scriptures actually say, into whatever we want it to be, or we try and make it match what we're taught in the schools and all that. And definitely as a country as a whole, we're not believing in Jesus Christ, and we're not following how he has told us to live. And so that's why we're lied to about what all of this actually means, and we're not actually in a state of freedom and liberty and prosperity. Now, if you go into the Capitol building and you look straight up at the world's largest granite dome, what's in the very, very center of it? The stone woman, the symbol of his wife. Now, if we look at this image right here, if you're standing right here and you look straight up, you're looking at the dome that we just saw. But if you look at what's on the walls right here, here she is again, the stone woman, the robed woman, the symbol of the covenant that God made with his people, the children of Abraham. This is that symbol. This is his wife. And she's got the scales of justice and mercy in her hands right here, because that's what God is and what he does. He's the one who balances all the scales, the evil and the righteous. He's the one who is going to be able to correctly judge all of that. And then over here, we see her again, and she's got the firmament in her hand as well. And if we go into the state Senate chambers, I mean, these pillars are marvelous right here. Huge marble pillars, just amazing gold or brass work on them. And if we zoom in right here on this mural that sits back here, what do we find? The stone woman, the robed woman sitting on a throne, and all of this other ancient symbolism alongside her. And interestingly, if we zoom in here on the people, they're all wearing masks, because we're not in freedom and prosperity and true liberty. We're being tricked and deceived and lied to, and some very evil people are running things, and they've been telling us all, wear masks, lock down, believe what we tell you, trust the experts, and they're all lying and deceiving us about who we are, that God is real, that Jesus Christ is real, and that this is actually his promised land, and that there is very much an ancient covenant that's still playing out right now that we've forgotten about for the most part. And the only two stories that they give for this stone woman is, yeah, she just represents the state of Wisconsin or the state of Michigan, or the only other explanation is an obsession with Greek goddesses. Just like we read right here, this work, often referred to as the Golden Lady, consists of an allegorical figure reminiscent of Athena dressed in Greek garb. But those are just made up stories, and they can make up whatever story they want as long as it's not telling the truth, which is that what she actually is the symbol of the bride, the wife the covenant that God made with his people. So now we'll take a little look at the pediments, these triangle shapes above all these pillars right here that are on all four corners of this building. This one right here, what do we see right inside of it? We see the stone woman surrounded by other ancient people, all of them wearing robes. Here's a look at another one, same thing, robed woman holding symbols, wearing robes, surrounded by more ancient people. Another one, dead center, same thing, stone woman. Also right here, a bull and a horse, which we'll talk a little bit about in just a second. And then I mentioned earlier, there's also above these smaller domes right here, these statues, and there's 4 of those, one on each side. And this is what those look like. Here's the stone woman depicted 3 different times, holding different symbols, doing different hand signs each time. And right along with her is the stone eagle right there with his wings open. And if we go to Albany, New York, really anywhere, but I'll just show you this example. I like this one a lot. We see the robed stone woman. She's got the sword of truth right here, the scales of justice and mercy. And then we got the eagle with his feet on the firmament. And then this is the New York Capitol building in Albany, New York. Huge castle fortress type of building. And inside of it is this mural right here, which is a big, beautiful mural. And the dead center of it is the stone woman that you see right here with a shield in one hand, a sword of truth in the other hand, crown on her head, robed, and she has her foot on the firmament. Now we'll talk a little bit about why pyramids on these buildings. Because like I already mentioned, the people who built this stuff were obviously extremely advanced masons. And when you read the scriptures, the Bible, it specifically talks about how these people were advanced masons. The reason we don't think that it says that is because the images and the videos that we've been shown from the entertainment industries and the churches is all showing poor dirt rag people, and it's intentionally deceptive and they're intentionally lying to us about things. But if you read the text for what it actually says, it says these were advanced stonemasons moving around super heavy stone, building magnificent cities of super tall structures and pyramids of stone. And for a super in-depth breakdown of this on my We Zombie Rod of Iron channel, I have a playlist right here called The Stone Woman, and I break this down very thoroughly, showing that this is indeed actually what the scriptures are saying, and it's not even like it's actually obvious. We just been programmed with a bunch of lies. But if you read the text for what it actually says, these were advanced masonry civilizations building advanced masonry architecture. And this stone woman presentation, I show you all that. But interestingly, the Bible never ever says the word pyramid. The word pyramid does not exist in the Bible. But we know that ancient civilizations were building pyramids, not from stories, but because we can actually see them in different parts all over the world, and definitely also in the United States of America, although we've been programmed not to see our pyramids that way, but we do have pyramids all over these lands. And even though the Bible does not use the word pyramid, it is talking about their pyramid architecture over and over again. It just uses different words for what that architecture is. And nowadays, in modern days, because of what we've been taught in schools and through media, we think those words mean something else when they're actually referring to ancient pyramid architecture. For example, looking at the Old Testament again, Genesis 31:25 says, Jacob pitched his tent in the mount of Gilead, inside of a mount. Genesis 31:54 says he tarried all night in the mount, or in the pyramid. Exodus 4:27 says Moses went up into the mount, and in the mount met God. Exodus 24:12, God says to Moses, come up to me into the mount. Over and over again in the scriptures, it's talking about these ancient stonemasonry civilizations going into mounts, going in and out of mounts. It also says they went up and down them, but it's definitely saying they went inside of them a lot. When they're going in and out of mounts, in and out of mountains, in and out of hills, that's their pyramid architecture. And that's why the scriptures are talking about these ancient rich people going in and out of mounts and mountains. Even Jesus himself, which I'll show you in just a second. Exodus 24:13, Moses went up into the mount of God. He went into the pyramid of God. this makes so much more sense when you read the scriptures this way. They're not just going into dusty old rocks that the earth cast up 300 billion years ago from tectonic plates slowly shifting and glaciers slowly drifting. That's all a hoax. These were master masons anciently, and they built pyramids, hills, mounts, and mountains. Exodus 24:15, Moses went up into the mount. Exodus 25:40 talks about how God gave Moses the patterns to build the tabernacle because they were advanced masons and God was directly handing them patterns for how to build things. Those patterns were given to Moses when he was in the mount. Exodus 34:2 says, present thyself there to me in the top of the mount. In the top of the mount. The pyramidion, the floating part that we see on the back of the dollar bill, that top part with the sun shining behind it, that's the top of the mount. And Moses, God's telling Moses, come up into that part of the pyramid. Exodus 34:32, the Lord spoke with him in Mount Sinai, in the pyramid, in the mount. Numbers 13:17, go up into the mountain. Numbers 14:45 is talking about the Canaanites which dwelt in that hill. They were dwelling, living inside of a hill. Not some dusty little shrubbery and dirt and some rock. Pyramid architecture. Now it's all sitting in ruin and looks like dusty rock and shrubbery and dirt. But in ancient times, when they're going in and out of hills, in and out of mounts, in and out of mountains, they're talking about their pyramid architecture. Numbers 20:27, they went up into Mount Hor. Deuteronomy 1:6 says, ye have dwelt long enough in this mount. Talking about people living, dwelling inside of a mount or a pyramid. Deuteronomy 1:41, ye were ready to go up into the hill. Deuteronomy 32:49, get thee up into this mountain Abarim. Joshua 8:30, Joshua built an altar being advanced stonemasonry architecture, unto the Lord God of Israel in Mount Ebal. He built an altar inside of a pyramid. Judges 1:9, dwelt in the mountain. Judges 1:19, the inhabitants of the mountain. Judges 1:35, the Amorites would dwell in Mount Heres. Judges 3:27, in the mountain of Ephraim. 1 Samuel 7:1, the house of Abinadab in the hill. Ezekiel 4:2, they talk about building a fort and also casting a mount, building a pyramid. Daniel 11:5 also talks about casting up a mount, building a pyramid, building a mount. Matthew 5:1, this is talking about Jesus now. There's some Jesus verses of him going in and out of pyramids. He went up into a mountain. He went up into a mountain apart to pray. He went up into a mountain, up into a high mountain, into the Mount of Olives, into it, in the inside of it, into a mountain where Jesus had appointed them. And this is, the King Solomon's temple location, one of the most masterful pieces of architecture that's ever been built. If you're picturing just the image that we're shown of what this temple used to look like, again, that's a deceptive image. Just read what the scriptures actually say about it. The materials and the masons and the hewers of stone and the precious stones and the glistering stones that Solomon talks about in the Old Testament, that's the type of stuff that they lived in and built. And Jesus came to that place. That's where he ministered mostly, and it's talking about him going to in and out of mountains there, pyramids. Mark 3:13, he goeth up into a mountain. He departed into a mountain to pray. Up into a high mountain, he went out into a mountain to pray. Went up into a mountain to pray, he abode in the mount. That is called the Mount of Olives. He dwelled, he abode, he stayed inside the Mount of Olives, the Pyramid of Olives. John 6:3, Jesus went up into a mountain. He went into a mountain himself alone. 2 Peter 1:18, we were with him in the holy mount, in the holy pyramid. So this is why we see robed people, specifically the robed stone woman, all over this architecture, the stone eagle all over this architecture, and pyramids all over this architecture, because it's talking about these ancient Israelites, the seed of Abraham and the covenant that God made with them, and they were indeed advanced masons, building advanced temples, synagogues, palaces, towers, cities, kingdoms, and pyramids. And the scriptures say exactly this, but we've just been lied to and programmed to not see things that way, because the devil and his goons are very, very good at what they do. But if you read the scriptures and you are open to seeing what they actually say, it is giving the perfect explanation for all this architecture, all the symbolism on it, and why we're lied to about it. And then also in Wisconsin, there's mastodons that have been found, and this is one of the ways they moved weight back then, is mastodons and mammoths were very real and very much domesticated animals that these people, these advanced masons, used to help them move their weight around. They also had shipping and proper leveled roads and paved roads and ground transportation and all of that, but also mammoths and mastodons were a big part of that as well. One of the 4 statues that sits above the smaller domes on the building, a lot of them are the stone woman again, but this one right here is picturing 3 men, again with the stone eagle right here with its wings spread open. But this guy, I mean all of these men, but this guy on top right here has a shield, they're all wearing robes, and he also has a sword in his hand, and we're going to talk specifically about who this guy is depicted right here. In about 600 BC, when Jerusalem was about to be destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar, there was a family that escaped out of Jerusalem at that point, and this was prophesied several times in the Old Testament. For example, right here, 2 Kings 19:30 says, "The remnant that is escaped out of the house of Judah." The house of Judah location is Jerusalem. That's the tribe of Judah is one of the tribes of Jacob, whose name got changed to Israel. They were given the Jerusalem land, and then the tribe of Joseph was given another city, another land within the promised land called the city of Bethel, or it was also called the city of Luz. And so it was prophesied that there would be a remnant that would escape out of Judah, and right here it would take root downward and bear fruit upward, which is referring to that they would go to the Bethel Luz location, the house of Joseph location. And it says, 2 Kings 19:31, "Out of Jerusalem shall go forth a remnant, they that escape out of Mount Zion, the zeal of the Lord of hosts shall do this." And Isaiah 65:9 says, "I will bring forth a seed out of Jacob and out of Judah, an inheritor of my mountains, and mine elect shall inherit it, my servants shall dwell there." For a much more in-depth breakdown of this, because I'm not going to cover everything on my We Zombie Rod of Iron channel right here, there's a playlist called The Stone Woman, and this is what this whole playlist is for. It's 12 videos long, and it's to explain this whole ancient covenant, this promised land thing, and how the tribe of Judah got a location called Jerusalem, but the tribe of Joseph got a location called Bethel Luz. And there's this remnant that was prophesied that would escape from Jerusalem, the Judah location, and would go to the Bethel Luz Joseph location. And this seed of Jacob, this seed of Joseph that escaped out of Jerusalem going to the Joseph spot, the Bethel Luz spot, is what the entire Book of Mormon is about. I realize that a lot of people think the Book of Mormon is talking about all the weird stuff that people hear about the Mormons. It's actually not. It's very much not. It's talking about how in 600 BC, God told a family to escape, and that family was a seed of Joseph, some of the posterity of Joseph of Egypt, and they went and settled basically Missouri and the surrounding areas, which is the house of Joseph location, the Bethel Luz location that the Old Testament talks about. And if we read the introduction of the Book of Mormon right here, it says it's a record of God's dealings with the ancient inhabitants of the Americas. So the people that anciently lived here that would have built all this stuff, that's what it's talking about. And it gives a record of an account of 2 great civilizations, one that came from Jerusalem in 600 BC and separated into 2 nations known as the Nephites and the Lamanites. And that's who I'm going to point out who this is right here, is this is actually a Nephite depicted in stone right here, alongside all these other symbols that I explained in part 1, because they were the continuation of this ancient covenant. They were the seed of Joseph being brought back to the Bethel Luz location. And the second verse of the Book of Mormon says, "I make a record in the language of my father, which consists of the learning of the Jews and the language of the Egyptians." So going back to this state office building, I showed you the stone eagle and all of these pyramids right here, Egyptian style pyramids. And if we scroll down on this page right here, it's calling these pillars right here that sit at the entrance of the state office building that also has the eagle and the pyramids on it. It says it's a wink to massive Egyptoid columns that flank the main entrance. So it's calling this stuff Egyptian architecture. And the Book of Mormon is about Egyptian and Jewish style people escaping from Jerusalem and settling Missouri and all the surrounding areas. and it was in the language of the Egyptians. And we're going to read a little bit more right now about what they built. So these Nephites that the Book of Mormon talks about says they were exceedingly rich in gold and in silver and in precious things, in fine workmanship of wood, in buildings, in machinery, and also iron, copper, brass, and steel. They made all manner of tools of every kind to till the ground, and weapons of war. So here's a perfect description of all the materials that we see these buildings constructed of and adorned with. Is all these materials right here. It says they had machinery, so that's how they were able to build all this amazing architecture. And they had all manner of tools of every kind to till the ground, to work the earth for crops and agriculture, and also weapons of war, because the Lamanites were constantly trying to battle the Nephites and take over all this amazing stuff that they built. So they also had to make wars and defend themselves against invaders, which is what we're seeing right here. A Nephite with a sword and a helmet, armed up, ready to defend himself. And he's also wearing a robe because the Nephites very much believed in and worshiped Jesus Christ until they stopped doing that, and then they ended up getting wiped out. And the Lamanites are the ones that ended up wiping them out completely, and the Lamanites remained on the land, and that's who the Native Americans are, and where they come from is they're the leftovers of the Lamanite civilization that wiped out the Nephite civilization that built all this amazing architecture and depicted themselves on it, and they were the continuation of that ancient covenant. They were the seed of Joseph being brought back to the seed of Joseph location, which is the Bethel loose city that the Old Testament talks about, and the Judah tribe got the Jerusalem location, 2 different cities in 2 different locations. It also says that when the Nephites arrived to this land, they discovered a land which was covered with bones of men and of beasts, and was also covered with ruins of buildings of every kind, having discovered a land which had been peopled with a people who were as numerous as the hosts of Israel. So not only did they build a lot of amazing cities and architecture, but they also discovered empty cities and empty architecture, because just like the Old Testament said, all the people, the tribe of Judah, the tribe of Joseph, and all the other tribes were swept off the land because they started behaving wickedly and stopped following Jesus Christ. And so when they got to these places, that's what they found was empty cities, and that seemed to be as numerous as the hosts of Israel. And it also says that they tilled the ground, and they built buildings, and they were industrious, and they did labor exceedingly. And if we look right here, this is also on the state office building. You can see you got the pyramids up here. But then you also have this depiction, like this shield right here, and it's got 4 different symbols, well 5, but 4 on the exterior of the circle right here. This one right here is a plow. Like we just said, they tilled the earth. They created all manner of tools to till the earth. We have masonry tools right here, a pick and a shovel. Then you also have an arm holding a hammer right here, a mallet or a gavel. More masonry tool, also mallet is a symbol of judgment. And then I can't really tell what this one is. I think it's like a cross at an angle, but I can't really make out the rest of it. It's a little too blurry. And those are all symbols that exactly match the Nephite civilization described in the Book of Mormon. It says they began to be a very numerous people. They scattered abroad upon all the face of the earth, and they built large cities and villages in all quarters of the land. They were exceedingly rich. They had an abundance of flocks and herds, fatlings of every kind, an abundance of grain, of gold, of silver, of precious things, an abundance of silk and fine twined linen, and all manner of good homely cloth. They were very rich, very advanced stonemasonry civilizations. And it describes the Nephites specifically as a people with breastplates and arm shields and shields to defend their heads, and they also wore thick clothing. And then it describes Lamanites as mainly being naked, save it were a skin which was girded about their loins. That's what the Indian depictions, the Native American Indians that were depicted and shown, that's where this imagery comes from, and you'll find this all over this stone architecture as well. It's depicting Nephites and Lamanites, not cowboys and Indians. That's a made-up story. The truth is Nephites and Lamanites, advanced stonemasonry civilizations that knew Jesus Christ, that were the continuation of the covenant that God made to Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, because they were the seed of Jacob, seed of Joseph, escaping, that remnant escaping Jerusalem around 600 BC and being taken to the promised covenant location promised to Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph. And this is a huge deception that we're under. They've made it very confusing, but the tribe of Judah was promised Jerusalem. King David and the tribe of Judah, they got Jerusalem. But the other tribes, specifically the tribe of Joseph, got the Bethel Luce location, which is now what we call Missouri. Now, if we look at the New York Capitol building again right here, I showed you this mural right here on top that has the stone woman with her foot on the firmament. And then right below her right here, I'll show you a better shot of this, but you can see there's kind of two men right there, a dark man and a lighter man. Here's a better look at it. And what this is right here is not a cowboy and an Indian or a pilgrim and an Indian. This is Nephite and Lamanite depiction. And you can see right here, there's the eagle with its wings spread open. And right above them is the stone woman right here. All 100% the covenant symbolism, and it's showing the Nephites and the Lamanites as the continuation of that covenant. So you got the Nephite right here with thick clothing, and then you have the Lamanite right here, mostly naked with his head shaved and a little bit of something around his waist, exactly as described in the Book of Mormon. And it also says in the Book of Mormon, Alma 46:36, that the Nephites built towers in all the land. And we see towers, huge stone towers across all of the land. And they also built forts of security for every city in all the land round about, and so that the Lamanites could not get into their forts of security by any other way save by the entrance, because of the highness of the bank which had been thrown up and the depth of the ditch which had been dug round about it. Star forts, bastion forts, that's what it's talking about right here. This one in New York, this one in Kentucky, this one in Florida, this one in Louisiana, another one in New York, here's one in Tennessee. This is all the forts that the Nephites built that the Book of Mormon talks about. The seed of Joseph that the Native American Indians remain on this land from, their ancestors built this stuff. They were extremely advanced stonemasonry civilizations. It also says they became exceedingly expert in the working of cement, not to be confused with concrete. Cement is an ingredient in concrete. It's a binder, like we see right here. It says cement is a fine powdery substance that acts as a binding agent in construction. So you can use cement in all different types of stone to help bind it and make it much more solid. So they became, the Nephites, exceedingly expert in working of cement, in stonework, in masonry, which is exactly what we see in all this building, all this architecture everywhere. Some of our Capitol buildings being some of their best architecture that is still here, that we still can see and touch and walk inside of. And it also says that they had shipping, and they built ships, and they built temples and synagogues and sanctuaries. And they had all manner of gold, silver, precious ores of every kind, and curious workmen, advanced workmen, who did work all kinds of ore and did refine it. They did become rich, and they did dig it out of the earth, and they did cast up mighty heaps of earth to get their ore, gold, silver, iron, and copper. Huge mining operations, which would have to have occurred for all these buildings and all the insane materials that they're made out of and that they're adorned with. You gotta really dig into the earth to get a lot of that stuff, and that's exactly what it says they did. Huge mining projects to dig it out of the earth. They cast up mighty heaps of earth, and they did work all manner of fine work with these materials, and that's exactly what we're looking at on these buildings, is extremely fine work by advanced masonry civilizations. And they also had all manner of tools to till the earth, to plow, to sow, to reap, to hoe, and thrash, and they did make all manner of tools with which they did work their beast. We'll talk more about their beasts in just a second, but if we go back to this image right here, all manner of tools, plow, masonry tools, showing that they worked the land and they built amazing architecture. And it's also always a shield, and it's on fortified buildings, because they had to fortify their cities, because they had to deal with war a lot. Like it says right here, they did make all manner of weapons of war, and they did work all manner of work of exceedingly curious workmanship, advanced workmanship. They had all manner of cattle, oxen, cows, sheep, swine, goats, and many other kinds of animals, and horses and asses, and they also had elephants and curlums and cumums, all of which were useful unto man, but more especially it says the elephants and curlums and cumums were the most helpful to them. And right here in Wisconsin, evidence of mastodons. In the late 19th century, the late 1800s, they discovered many mastodon fossils in southern Wisconsin. The Boaz mastodon is the skeleton of a mastodon found near Boaz, Wisconsin. And this is New York, they found mastodons. California, they found mastodons and mammoths. So these were very much animals that existed in these lands previously, and that's what it's saying right here in the Book of Mormon. They had elephants and also curlums and cumums, which we don't know animals by those names nowadays, but it's, you know, they're talking about elephants. It could very well be that it's part of the element family, so we could be talking about Mastodons and Mammoths right here. A great way to move some weight, and there's evidence that those animals were here previously, and it talks in the scriptures about them using those types of animals because they were useful to help them build and do agriculture. So the Israelites, the children of Abraham, Jacob, and Joseph, that the Old Testament specifically talks about, they were in these lands. And then they got swept off, but this remnant that escaped out of Jerusalem, known as the Nephites and the Lamanites, they were the ones most closest to us that were in these lands, that were the continuation of that covenant, that built most of the stuff that we see. But even they found empty cities and empty buildings, and they repaired some of those. So there were even buildings here already from people older than them. And they arrived in these lands around like 590 BC, and they were here till about 400 AD. That's when the Nephites got completely destroyed, and then from 400 AD to the 1500s, when the British Empire shows up, the Lamanites were here the whole time, and that's who we now know as the Native American Indians, but they're really just the seed of Joseph, the descendants of the Lamanites who fought and battled against the Nephites, who were advanced masonry people that really knew Jesus Christ, and that's why all these symbols match Jesus Christ symbolism, because they were the continuation of that covenant, and they knew that, and they worshiped Jesus Christ until they stopped worshiping Jesus Christ and they got swept off the land. And then also in the Book of Mormon, we see the same thing as far as pyramids go. They're going in and out of their hills, mounts, and mountains a lot. I, Nephi, 1 Nephi 16:30, I, Nephi, did go forth up into the top of the mountain. It came to pass that I arose and went up into the mountain. I, Nephi, did go into the mount oft, and I did pray oft unto the Lord in the mount. Into the mount, into the pyramid, often. He sent a secret embassy into the Mount Antipas. He went up into the mount. The brother of Jared had carried up into the mount. The brother and Jared came down out of the mount, in and out of these mounts, in and out of these pyramids. And we have these in our country still. They're just covered up with dirt and shrubbery. This one right here in Royalton, Vermont, you can even make out the terracing throughout the trees. These are trees that were not planted even that long ago. This architecture, a lot of it was exposed not even that long ago. Right here you can see the stone through it, and it's very much in the shape of a pyramid. Bennington, Vermont, you've got this mount out here, this pyramid architecture with a huge stone obelisk attached to it. This one right here sticks out like a sore thumb, but all this covered up with shrubbery right here is pyramid architecture. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, you can see right here, nicely shaped pyramid. Denver, Colorado, nicely shaped pyramids. Capitol Reef, Utah, got some nice pyramids right here sitting in ruin. San Diego, California, there's a lot of pyramids in California, and we know there's pyramids down in Mexico, and all the Rocky Mountains in California and all that used to be part of Mexico. There was no magic border back in ancient times that said you can't come up here into California and Utah and build your pyramids. These civilizations, like we read, spread out over all the land, and part of what they built was stone masonry pyramids. San Clemente, California, you got a couple pyramids right here, and I'll give you a better shot of this one right here, where you can see the pyramidion, the top of it, still very much nicely intact. And this is a conservation area. You're not allowed to go back there without risking, like I went as close as you could get. You're not allowed to go any further unless you're willing to risk getting thrown in jail. Ranchita, California, bunch of pyramids right here. Fresno, California, you can clearly see that this is old stone architecture, especially here at the bottom, nicely shaped mounts. And then Moapa, Nevada, you got a pyramid right here, stone pyramid sitting in ruin. You got Pyramid Lake in California, where they're showing you this pyramid triangle shape. And then also all this out here is just, it's like like if someone's lying down and they have a blanket on top of them, you can still make out that it's a person, but it's not a very defined shape of a person. But you can see like, okay, that's kind of the head, there's the chest, there's the feet over here. It's the same thing. There's just been like this blanket of dirt and shrubbery put over the pyramids in the United States, but you can still make out all the shapes really nicely in some areas. Like this, got that poking out right there, very obvious. These ones right here are obviously pyramid shapes. Again, we're told this is just 300 billion years of tectonic plates casting these up, but I'm going with these are just old pyramids sitting around in the United States, and we just call them hills, mounts, and mountains. And this Great Pyramid of Cholula right here down in Mexico is a great example of how this works. It's just dirt and shrubbery until you pull the dirt off of it and the shrubbery off of it, and it's this type of architecture, ancient, extremely advanced pyramid masonry architecture. And in Mormon 6:6 right here, it says that the ancient records that the Nephites were keeping that were eventually translated into what is now called the Book of Mormon, those ancient records were hid up in the hill Cumorah, or the pyramid Cumorah. All the records which had been entrusted into Mormon's hands, they were hid up. He hid them up in the hill or pyramid Cumorah. So all this architecture and the people on it and the symbols on it are standing proof, staring us all in the face, saying this ancient covenant's real that God made with Abraham. And the Bible's telling us all about it, and the Book of Mormon is also telling us all about it.